Hey, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and today I'm going to show you how you can make these modern drawer pulls using some simple 1x1 tubing from the hardware store and only basic tools for about $1 each. Check it out. Alright, so you're not going to need much for this one. I've got some 1x1 by 16th inch wall, plain steel square tube. I bought this from Home Depot. What's nice about this is it's really thin, and if you put your finger inside and feel it, this has a welded seam. But on this piece in particular, the welded seam is right on the corner. So when you go to buy a piece of steel, you can usually see the welded seam. It's a discolored, usually a darker black color. And if you get a piece where the welded seam is on the corner, you don't really have to do as much cleanup on the inside. Now, we're going to cut this down into a 3-inch piece, and there's a couple different ways to do it, but the most low-tech way that you can is with a hacksaw. I'm going to clamp it in this vise, and I'll show you how quick and easy it is to cut a piece of tubing like this with just an inexpensive hacksaw on a $2.50 blade. When I'm cutting a piece of steel like this with a hacksaw, I always like to mark the two sides along with the top, just so that I can kind of watch the saw as it goes down and make sure that the blade isn't drifting. This has got a used blade on it, but I think it'll still work fine. So once you're past that top bit, you really just want to make sure the saw cuts down nice and square. The other thing to note is that hacksaw blades, the teeth are raked like this. So they only cut in one direction. So applying pressure when you're pulling is actually just rounding over those teeth. So you always want to cut with a hacksaw like you would cut with a file. You know, you can use the backward motion to kind of get yourself set in a groove, but once you're cutting, you just want to push forward. There's usually a forward mark on the blade. Okay, so now I've got our 3-inch piece. So now the way we're going to make these drawer pulls is we're actually going to cut this in 2 locations, and we're going to essentially split this piece of material. Before we do that, I'm just going to grab a file and clean up these burrs. I'm just trying to make this so that it doesn't cut my hand while I'm handling it. If you have a belt sander, that'll work really well too. We're going to open up this vise and we're going to cut this 2 other ways. We're going to mark this before we do it. And what we want is on opposing sides, we want to cut about a 1/4 inch down long ways like that. Now this cut's going to be a little more difficult to do with the hacksaw, but I'm also going to show you how you could do this with an angle grinder, which is a bit easier, but for argument's sake, we'll do it with the hacksaw first, because again, this is a really inexpensive tool. Anyone can go out and buy. Get one at like a garage sale. I'm trying to make that saw cut groove to connect my front cut and my back cut. Once that groove is cut, you can move a little bit faster. And there's usually a little bit of tension in a piece of tubing like this. So when you cut it, the gap will either open or close. So if the gap closes, you might have to take the blade out of your hacksaw. So now since we use the hacksaw on this side, we're also going to use a hacksaw on the other side. And the same principle would go for if you were using a grinder, you would want to use the same cutting implement on both sides, because the kerf of the blade you want to be equal, because you want these two drawer pulls to look the same. Okay. So now we've essentially got our two drawer pulls right here. Now, we want to take a file and clean up all those burrs. And if we look inside this one, we can see that weld. See the weld in there? Now, sometimes that weld will be right in the center of the tube, and then you'd have to get in there with a file and clean it up. Okay, so now that both of these are done, you can see the way these are going to work, right? They're just a little pull for your fingertips. Really nice and clean looking, and with a little bit of paint, no one will ever even be able to know that you made them out of a piece of tubing. The last thing we need to do to them, though, is we need to drill and countersink 2 holes for screws in them. So we want them to be kind of even. So we'll just use our finger to kind of mark off an area. There's definitely more precise ways to do this than with a Sharpie, but you get the idea. So a big question that I get from people is, how do you drill holes in steel? What kind of special drill bits do you need? All that stuff. The answer is you don't need special drill bits. I'm going to use a regular high-speed steel drill bit set that I got from Home Depot. They're Ryobi bits. They're pretty inexpensive, and I have drilled thousands of holes with them, and they all work great. Obviously, drill bits do get dull no matter which type you buy, but for general purposes, you can use a regular drill and regular drill bits, and you can drill through steel easily. The one thing we do want to do is put a little bit of a center mark on these holes, because the drill bit will want to wander in the steel. We can do that just with a little center punch. Before we drill this, we want to punch those. We want to punch center marks in the steel. This is just a punch from Stanley. Got it from the hardware store. You can just line it up, and it'll just give your drill bit somewhere to go, so it won't wander. So I'm going to be drilling these holes with this Ryobi drill. This is a Ryobi HP, their new high performance drills. These things are awesome, super compact, and they've got a lot of torque, and for a really low price. Their battery system is awesome. If you've watched my other videos, you've seen me use their nail guns and some of their other tools. So I'm going to be giving these drills a shot. And I've been drilling steel with these for a couple of weeks since I got them, and they haven't let me down. And they have enough torque to easily get through this with this 1-inch bit. The one thing you want to be careful, though, with anytime you're drilling a piece of steel is that you want to make sure that it can't spin on you. This bit's going to want to grab that steel and shoot this thing away. So we have to clamp it really well. You can clamp it to your bench, but if you have a vise, holding it in there is even better. And we're just going to use a slow speed and a nice steady down pressure to get this drill through the holes. So these are the screws that I'm going to be using. These are little wood screws. Now, I have to drill this hole out a little bit bigger for these to fit, which is fine because we have a good pilot. But then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to countersink the head. Now, this is a countersink. It's kind of a specialized tool. You can get them at, Home Depot or a hardware store. And the taper here matches the taper on the screw. If you don't have one of these though, you can just use a larger drill bit. The taper isn't going to be the same, but it will give you a little recess for the head of this screw to sit in a little more flush. Let's chase this out and then countersink these holes using the drill bit. You can see how our screws fit, but they don't sit flush. So by using that larger drill bit, I'm able to create a recess. While it's not perfect like it would be with a countersink, it's enough to get the head of the screw to sit in there. And now when we mount this thing, those heads of the screws won't be in the way. So that's one down. Let's do the other one. This one I'm going to do with the countersink so you can see the difference. The countersink hole using the proper tool is much cleaner than using the drill bit, but in a jam you can use a drill bit and it'll work out fine. The last thing we'll do is we'll just clean up the backs of these with a file because there's a burr from where you drilled your holes. Now I'm going to paint these, but before I do, I'm just going to take the orbital sander and clean them up a little bit. So if you like the raw steel look, you could clean these with acetone and just spray them down with some varnish or some lacquer, and they'll stay from rusting, especially inside. But I'm going to paint these a flat black, which I think is a really nice look for this style, kind of modern drawer pull. And then we'll screw them onto a panel so you can see how they look. While this paint dries, I'll show you the cutting process using an angle grinder and a cutting disc versus using the hacksaw. You can see how fast this is with a grinder. Now these pieces are going to be hot, so once you grind them, be careful not to burn yourself. You can quench them in some water if you want to cool them down fast. So you can see in just a couple minutes I'm able to make essentially the same thing using the grinder. The only thing is the kerf on the grinding wheel is bigger than the thickness of a hacksaw blade, so you're going to lose more material. So this bottom lip is going to be smaller. So if you are going to use a grinder, you might want to start with a larger tubing and overall make this bigger or make the lip smaller. All right, I used some Rust-Oleum flat black on these. These look pretty dry, so we can take these off. Now I don't have any active drawer boxes that I'm building in the shop or any projects that I'm working on that have drawer faces, but I'm going to clamp some material in here so you can get an idea of what these would look like on a white face and on a plywood face. So here's just a piece of white pre-prime material. We'll screw one of these in so you can get an idea of what it's going to look like. What's nice about having a 2-hole drawer pull is that they're very easy to level. Nice. So you can see there's a nice little purchase for your fingers to grab right there. And it's a really clean, modern looking drawer pull that, with a little more cleanup on these edges, I left them a little rough. You would never know it didn't get purchased from the store for about, what, $1.50 to $2 each. Let's do one in plywood. Now for this one, I'm using some black number 6 by 1 inch drywall screws so that they look and match with the black on the drawer pull. Again, super clean look. Super clean, good registration underneath your fingers, and you can easily open and close a drawer with this. You could make one wider. You could put 2 on a drawer if you wanted. The possibilities are really endless with this design, and they're so inexpensive, you can afford to kind of experiment with them. All right, that about does it for this video. This is a great DIY solution if you're maybe redoing your kitchen or you're building some cabinets or furniture for your own home or even for a client. I've actually used these on a couple of client jobs, and I've shown off these type of samples to sort of sell them to a client. What's really nice about these is I can make them any width I want. You know, this piece of tubing happens to be 4 feet long, so I mean in reality you could make a 4 foot long one if you had the desire to. They're really nice in colors. I usually paint them black, but they would look great with some varnish in a raw steel. And overall, I think it's a really awesome kind of usage of a typical piece of construction material like this 1x1 tubing to make something that would normally cost you a lot more money. Drawer pulls can be some of the most expensive accessories to add to a kitchen once it's done. So if you're maybe refreshing your kitchen or refreshing your bathroom, and maybe you've repainted your cabinets and you want a simple modern drawer pull, you can make these yourself in your garage or even just on a workbench with only a drill, an impact gun, and a hacksaw and a file. You know, that's very basic, very, very minimal tooling. I want to say thank you to Home Depot for providing me with these Ryobi tools. These are the new HP high performance drills and drivers that they have on the market. I use a lot of different types of drills here in the shop, and I do a lot of metal work. So I'm always pushing my tools to the limit, drilling big holes in steel with hole saws and stuff like that. I've been using these for a couple of weeks, and I have to say these perform just as well, if not better, than some of the other much more expensive drills that I have. If you've watched my videos in the past, you know that I have a bunch of other Ryobi tools. I use their brad nailers a ton. I've been using their brad nailers for 5 years, and at one point I was a full-time trim carpenter using them every day, and they worked perfectly. If you're looking to get into a battery platform, don't look over the Ryobi stuff. I actually really like it, and it's been great. So thank you to them. Check them out. There'll be some links in the description to check out these new drills that they have and the angle grinder that I used as well. I'll also put some links to a hacksaw and stuff like that. If you want to see more videos like this and more videos of me making stuff in my shop, be sure to follow me here, subscribe to my channel, and give this video a thumbs up. If you want to see what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis here in the shop, check out my Instagram right here, @MakeEverythingShop. I post every day, and I'm always doing something new, showing a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and I have a good dialogue back and forth with people that follow me, sending me messages and comments and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.